Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Turns out, a delightfully clean home can make for a delightful start to the day. At Mrs. Meyer's, everything we make is inspired by the garden. With plant-derived and other thoughtfully chosen ingredients, our cleaning products smell like a dream and work like the dickens, leaving your home sparkly clean and your to-do list tackled in no time. Goodness, there's no better feeling than that. Mrs. Meyer's, rooted in goodness. Visit mrsmeyers.com today.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about, a very relatable topic, recovery from a breakup. Everybody's had breakups, probably, except for a very, very small subset of people who married their first, partner, and recovery from a divorce, which is, fewer people. As I always talk about, the 50% divorce rate is a myth, and you can look it up and, whatever. But point being that if you follow me on social media, then you certainly know that I've linked the Business Insider article a lot. And in many demographics, it's like 11%, But point being that everybody's had a breakup. Some people have had a divorce. And sometimes you take it harder than you would expect. And today we talk about why. But before that, it's interesting. It's a related topic, sort of. The most recent subscriber episode was why your wife takes deaths harder than you may expect. So that one is actually pretty relatable to this one. So the entire concept of complicated grief, I'm not going to go into that in this because I did in that. So you should listen to that one in order to better understand what may be going on. Okay, so when people come in and they're trying to recover from a divorce, that's a great reason to come into therapy, by the way. Socially condoned. I mean, for real, like you probably needed therapy before, but now you got a reason. I mean, for real, that's like the pandemic. All these people that needed therapy, they're like, oh, now I'm dealing with stress of the pandemic. Oh, okay, now I don't have to say I have a problem. But then we come in and within 10 minutes, we're talking about why they should have always come in, And so if you are recovering from a divorce or a breakup, the thing is you pick that person and you stayed in a relationship with them. So you could do two things. You could either blame them for being a total piece of shit and then you get no growth out of it. You're dishonest and you fuck up your kids. So you see from how I'm framing it, it's probably not a good option. Or you could own your own contribution and figure out the long-standing patterns in your life and upbringing that led you to this point. Ding, ding, ding. That's the one that I recommend, right? So a lot of people come in there like, my ex was such an asshole and I'm recovering because they're abusive. Well, when they describe to me the quote-unquote abuse, it sounds like two consensual people locked in fighting for years. Where one played the martyr and one played the perpetrator. The martyr and the ice queen dynamic, Mr. Perfect and his crazy wife. I delineate these dynamics in podcasts, and I also have my new book, Couples You Meet in Counseling, includes both of those. And so and that's not to say that there are not some abusive relationships. Of course, there's abusive relationships. It doesn't mean that the, quote, abuser is a monster. They're doing what they learned growing up and they are not behaving well. And very frequently, the other one isn't behaving well either. And of course, in some cases, there's like a real, like it's an arranged marriage. She feels she has to stay. He gets drunk and he beats the shit out of her. Yes, there's that, or otherwise, a man feels such low self-esteem and so trapped that like he's just walking on eggshells around a woman with borderline personality disorder. But still, why in that latter case then, or a woman just stays with a narcissist, narc abuse, for like forever, for years. but she has kids with him. She goes on vacations with him. She posts about that she loves him sometimes. Like, it's a conflictual relationship, That's what it is. It's a dysfunctional relationship. Unless somebody has really something over you that you're really scared, they've threatened to kill you, they're going to leave, like if you leave them, it's going to be like the end of your life, or they have all the money, you can't figure out how to get any money to live. There are people in these situations. That's not who I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is people who are in a dysfunctional relationship. So they say there's emotional abuse, but it's somebody acting like an asshole, and then they act kind of like an asshole back. The one who's aggressive is counted as the abusive. The one who's passive aggressive is counted as the victim. Or the one who enables is counted as the victim. And that, there's no benefit to looking at your life like that. I've seen people locked into these I was abused frameworks in perpetuity. They cannot recover because they think about themselves as only a victim, and that they had absolutely no reason that they picked the person, that they stayed with the person, or that they perpetuated anything. That is certainly not what I recommend, right? Because that leads to really just learned helplessness, a very paralyzing view of the world. And it's not true, If you are there and you are having fights with somebody, then you got to look in at why you're fighting it. So let's look in at that. If you grew up in a dysfunctional home and you feel like you do not deserve to be happy and that nobody can really be happy after all, then you think this is your best bet. If you think marriage is shit because you saw your parents fighting and drinking and hitting or cursing or just completely hated each other, you think that's what marriage is. If yours is even a little bit better than that, then at first you think that you're winning. You don't imagine that anybody's really close friends or confides in their spouse or has sex regularly. Some people do think that people have crazy, sex when they're in the middle of fighting and drinking. Those are the people who I just did a video on, like which people are happy with asexual partners. Frequently, it's men who saw this type of crazy shit. Their mother was drinking, volatile, borderline personality most likely, and had sex with her boyfriends, with the father, whatever. But she was still just terrible to him. Then he's like, no, I want a calm person. If she doesn't want sex, okay, can't get everything, And so that's the people who are happier with an asexual partner. And I did a little video about that. Because some guy commented on my stuff, a couple of guys commented on my stuff. I don't mind being married to an asexual woman. It's a loving, close relationship. We haven't had a fight in 2 decades plus. So so you can see that there's nothing that is just uniformly only good, as I say, reasons you may not want your wife to be a porn star in bed. I have a whole post on that. But anyway, point is, if you find it really hard to recover from a breakup or from a divorce, it's likely that you have painted yourself as the victim. And you may not be the victim in the way that you think, but you may not be willing to talk about that in the therapy that you probably go to, primarily to paint yourself as a victim. And I know this sounds harsh. I know it does. It's not meant to be harsh. It's meant to be with love for people that literally say to me, why have I been in therapy for 10 years after a divorce and I still feel upset about it? Because nobody's looking at what you did, why you picked the person. That this relationship likely was exactly the relationship you saw growing up. You wouldn't have been comfortable with a woman or a man who would have treated you well. You may have had those in the past, but then something was wrong. It was boring, whatever. We grew apart. And this one who treated you poorly was very familiar. And then you were locked into this whole identity of being victimized by this person. And this person wasn't having fun either. It's like people act as though, if my ex cheated on me, then they were living their best life. No, they were probably very unhappy, miserable people. People who struggle with dysfunctional behavior, like cheating, which is very much not socially condoned, they don't feel good about it. I work with so many men that cheat on their wives, right? And many fewer women, a handful over 15 years, women cheat at much, lower rates. That's the lower sex drive, they're raising the babies, etc. But the point is the men who cheat, they're not happy to be cheating. A lot of them are like, something's wrong with me, like I'm a sex addict. I reach out to hookers. I look at porn all the time. Like I don't know how to assert myself in my marriage. I don't feel close to my wife. Maybe I married the wrong person because I was scared of acting, of doing something different than what was expected of me. Either way, these people who are cheating are not just living the high life, They are not happy and they are feeling bad about themselves and ashamed. So nobody is winning in these situations, And if you can step out and see your relationship as a dysfunctional relationship, instead of a situation where a person that called you an idiot is considered an emotional abuser and then it's no longer even thought about. Now that's emotionally abusive. But, what was you calling them a narcissist, saying that their mother's a narcissist, like this, that, and the other? It's, that's most commonly what I see. Somebody is more aggressive and somebody's more passive aggressive. And if you were in a situation where all you did for 10 years was walk around eggshells while somebody called you a piece of shit and you stayed, then that is what needs to be interrogated. That's what you saw. That's how you think about yourself. That's your low self-esteem. Blaming all of this, if it wasn't that person you found, you would have found somebody else to treat you like shit. Because that's all that you welcomed as a possibility from the universe. That was the only possible outcome. And it's hard to hear that, maybe you expected such bad things to happen to you that you only would have been comfortable with this bad person. But blaming this person in perpetuity. Instead, you got to learn to set boundaries with this person if you still have to co-parent with them. Learn more about them. Certainly, maybe they have a disorder, maybe they're an addict, maybe they have maybe they are one of the 1% narcissistic personality disorder. Who knows? But more importantly, looking at yourself. What did you see growing up? What were the expectations you got from marriage from your childhood? Which role are you taking, your mother or your father? Why did you stay? What was the fantasy? Usually it's to change the person, How did you tell yourself that this was going to end up and why? Some people hear a story where their mother finally did change their father. He drank all the years and now he doesn't drink anymore. And that's a success story. So then they pick a man who drinks all the time and they tell themselves they're going to do it too. And they've never really interrogated why. Or maybe they don't drink. Maybe they work all the time or they use porn or they overexercise or whatever. And she thinks she's going to change him, or he thinks he's going to change her. What is the role of you and your expectations, your boundaries? Did you assert any boundaries? Many, many times I hear a situation where somebody calls somebody a name and the person doesn't even say, don't call me names. So the quote unquote abuser grew up in a house where there was name calling. Now that's called emotional abuse. Cool. Nobody should call names for sure. That is very bad. But we talk in marital counseling and the person never even said, don't do that. Literally. Why? Because they have such low self-esteem that they expect it. And also it makes sense to them given the way that they actually think they are an idiot. It's almost like the person is like the voice. It's like that person is their internal voice. So overall, point being, it's a really very simple and valid point, I believe, over the course of my work. If you are perseverating on blaming the person for your breakup and or you're unable to get back on your feet after a breakup emotionally, or you distrust the entire other gender or whatever it is, you got to look in at yourself. Many people are very scared. They don't want to blame their parents. You're not blaming your parents. To look in at them objectively, you're getting a sense of why you do what you do. And that, once you learn really about you, only then can you move on. Otherwise, it's this unprocessed thing, this very kind of primitive, like children have a defensive, their defense mechanisms are very primitive, like denial or projection. As you get older and more mature, as you work in therapy on a deeper level with more insight, you won't have to paint your ex as all bad, some kind of monster, Even in a situation, I used to work with kids who were abused, and many of them turned around and abused other kids sexually. And it really changed my frame. I used to think like everybody, you know, in my early 20s, it's a very mainstream thought that people who sexually abuse children are monsters. They're just pieces of shit, evil people. And then you work with them and you're like, oh, they were abused. They were literally abused kids. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. And then they turn into a human being and not a monster. A human being who definitely needs a lot of help and made terrible choices and who you wouldn't leave your kid with, but not a monster. Right? And so the same thing can be done for you to figure out, why do you keep painting kind of a very black and white fairy tale victim-perpetrator story about your old relationship and how that actually traps you and takes away your agency and autonomy. It strips it away and it leaves you stuck and unable to move forward. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to y'all soon. And as always, if you need a therapist or a coach, reach out to my practice, Best Life Behavioral Health. But only if you like people who are direct. Now, most people are not as direct as myself. Some of my coaches are. But, you know, I do hire people that I like, and I don't like people who just sit there endlessly in session and just let people vent at them and perpetuate victim-perpetrator narratives. I mean, you know, not that I'm sitting in anybody's session, but, you know, you can get a sense from somebody's personality about how long they are going to let you just talk before maybe we try to bring some insight into it. All right. I was going to say good work, so it felt like a session, but have a good day, guys, and I'll talk to y'all soon.